So some of my favourite stories in the book actually I saved until the end, and they're stories of men who pretended to be fashionable gentlemen. So they're not really figures at the heart of the beau monde, they're rather imposters. And what these gentlemen do, one is called Alexander Day, and he poses under the pseudonym Marmaduke Davenport, Esquire. And the other is James Hobart, who pretends to be the Duke of Ormond. And they're operating at different ends of the 18th century, but they both have very similar schemes in which they rent a flat in London, they hire a footman from a kind of, just pool of out-of-work domestic servants in London. And then they set up a very elaborate pretense of being part of the beau monde, in which they hire a carriage and go and drive around the London squares. But their aim in doing so is actually to convince the London shopkeepers that they are legitimate members of the fashionable elite. And the reason they do this is because the shopkeepers will lend them certain types of products. So, for example, Marmaduke Davenport manages to convince a watchmaker to lend him some watches. James Hobart, as the Duke of Ormond, pretends he's about to get married and gets lots of furniture makers and textile producers to come and give samples of their products, which he can keep and look at, and then with the idea that he will then make a big purchase at a later date. But of course, what both of these impostors do is borrow the products from the shops and then run off with a significant amount of stolen booty. And I think that what the story suggests to me as a historian is actually how the beau monde is perceived from the outside, what it is that people felt you needed to do in order to feign a fashionable status. But also what's interesting about it is the idea that actually the beau monde themselves would never have been taken in by such a performance. The elite society of the London beau monde was so determined by insider knowledge and personal networks that these impostors would never have actually broken into the ranks, but they were successful enough to convince shopkeepers to part with their products.